Good day, listeners at home. So the question before us is on projectile motion. And the question is, how long will it take a shell fire from a cliff at an initial velocity of 800 meters per second at an angle degree below the horizontal to reach the ground 150 meters below? Now, I believe you are going to agree with me that before you can boast of solving any question on a topic, you must have good knowledge of the concept. So before one can boast of solving this question, you must have good knowledge of the concept on projectile motion. Now, that is, you must know there are formulas that we use on projectile motion. You must know how the formula on projectile motion are derived before you can boast of solving this question. Now, let's solve it together. So we are going to do a simple sketch to illustrate the information from the question, the horizontal, then the vertical. So we have the projectile projected. That means the projectile is projected vertically downward because a shell fired from a cliff. This is the cliff now. A shell is fired to follow, the projectile will follow a parabolic path. So it will follow, because of the influence of gravitational force, it will follow a parabolic path like this because projected vertically downward. Then we have the angle, and we are told from the question that the angle between the projectile and the horizontal is 30 degrees, that is 30 below the horizontal. So this is horizontal. Then we have the velocity of projection, which is u, 800 meters per second. Then here we have angle 30 degrees below the horizontal. This is the horizontal now. Let's determine the vertical component of the velocity and the horizontal component of the velocity. Now, here we have right angle triangle. So using trig, this is angle 30 degrees facing this side. Then this side that the angle 30 degrees is facing is called opposite. Then here we have the adjacent. Then this is the hypotenuse. Now, we want to determine the opposite. Here we are using sine to determine the vertical component of the velocity, that is u of y, equals to, that is hypotenuse will now be u, then sine 30 degrees for the vertical component of the velocity. Now, for the horizontal component, we have u of x. U of x equals to u cos 30 degrees. Now, because we are dealing with projectile motion on vertical motion, we are dealing with vertical motion but downward motion. So we are going to consider the vertical component of the velocity, which is u of y, to be u sine 30 degrees. But Sir Isaac Newton gave us 4 formula in equation of motion, that is on horizontal motion. These are the formula that we use on horizontal motion. We are going to pick the third formula because according to the information we are given, we want to determine the time. So we can use any equation that has t, but depending on the information we are given from the question, then we are given the height, so that is between the cliff and the horizontal to be 150 meters. Then let's read the third equation. So the third equation, according to Isaac Newton, we have s equals to ut plus 1 over 2at squared. Now, because this is for horizontal motion, but we are dealing with vertical motion, but downward motion. Now, what we are going to do now is this h will turn to height. So we have h equals to, then this u will turn to u of y, because we are dealing with vertical motion. We have u of y multiplied by the time taken plus 1 over 2. Now, this a is for horizontal acceleration, which can change at any point in time, but we are using g now. So, which is constant, g multiplied by t squared. Now, according to the information we are given, this g is 10 meters per second squared. Acceleration due to gravity, we have g equals to 10 meters per second squared. Now, we are given u, then from u we can get u of y. U of y equals to u sine 30 degrees. And u is 800 meters per second, then sine 30 degrees. That implies we have 800 sine 30 is 0.5. When you simplify, you are going to have 400 meters per second. Now, let's substitute these values into this given equation. So we have h. H is 150. So the vertical distance, 150 meters. We have 150 meters equals u of y, which is 400 multiplied by t plus 1 over 2. G is 10 multiplied by t raised to power 2. Now, in this case, so we have 150 equals to 400t plus 2 goes in 10, that is 5. We have 5t squared. Now we have quadratic equation now. Let's reduce the equation by dividing 2 by 5 because 5 can go in all. Divide this by 5, this also by 5, and this by 5. When we divide by 5, 5 goes in 150, that is 30. 5 in 4, 40, that is 8. Then 5 in 0, 0, that is 80t plus. Then 5 goes in 5, that is why we have t squared. Let's rewrite this equation. So to form, though it's already quadratic equation, so that we can use either quadratic formula or factorization method if possible. Now we are going to write it in such a way that the leading term will be t squared. As we have t squared, then plus 80t, then this one is coming here because this one will not change, does not change its position. So this, then we are bringing 30 here, then it changes to minus 30 equals to 0. Now with this equation that cannot be factorized, let's use quadratic formula. That is, we have t equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now a, from this question, a is 1, the coefficient of t squared. Then b, the coefficient of t is 80. Now c is the constant term, which is minus 30. Let's substitute. We have t equals to minus 80, which is b plus or minus square root of 80 squared minus 4 times 1, the value of 8 times minus 30. Now divided by 2 times 1. Now let's simplify for so that we can determine the value of t in the simplest form. We have minus 80 plus or minus square root of 80 squared. That is 80 times 80. 80 by 80. Then minus times minus will change to plus. Then 4 times 1 times 30 will give us 30. So the reason I did not simplify this one is because we want to factorize. We are solving this question without using calculator. And we are going to leave our answer in source form. Now we have minus 80 plus or minus. Now 4, we are going to factorize 4 from here, then 4 from here. When we factorize 4, we have square root of 4 from 80. We have 20. Then times 80. Then minus plus 4 from 30 times 40. That's 30, 4 times 30. We are going to have 30 left. Because we have factorized 4 out, this 4 remains 30. When we factorize 4 out, divided by 2. Now when you simplify further, so square root of 4 is 2. Then we have minus 80, then plus or minus 2, square root of 20 by 80, that is 1600, then plus 30. Then we are dividing by 2. We have 2. Now therefore we have t equals to minus 80 plus or minus square root of 1600 plus, okay, we have 2 root 1600, here we have 2 here. So 1600 plus 30 will give us 1630. We are dividing by 2. Therefore, t equals to, now 2 is a common factor. Let's take this 2, factorize 2 out. We have 2 into 2 from minus 80, that's minus 40, plus or minus square root of, now when you factorize 2 from here, you have square root of 1630 left, divided by 2. These 2 cancel this. Therefore, t equals to minus 40 plus or minus square root of 1630. Okay, we have divided by 2 already. So now, but in this case, since time cannot be negative, what we are going to do, we are going to discard what the value of the, we are using plus or minus sign here. So that is, we have t equals to minus 40 plus square root of 1630, or t equals to minus 40 minus square root of 1630. So we are going to discard this value of t because t cannot be negative. So we discard this. Discard. So we have t to be equal to, because when you evaluate this, so because 1030, the square root of this must be greater than this. This can be written as t equals to square root of 1030 minus 40, which will give us a positive value. If you evaluate calculator, you are going to have 40.37 minus 40. This is in short form. So we have this in short form, which is in seconds. But if you are allowed to use calculator, you can simplify further. By the time the square root of 1030, then you take away 40 from it, then we have 0.37 seconds. So therefore, the time taken, the shell to reach the horizontal ground, which is 150 meters below, is 0.37 seconds. Thank you. Please like, share, comment. You are blessed.